Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's NKBA KBIS design webinar, Introduction to Integrated Lighting Design. As we continue our theme of lighting and design for May, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Hardware Resources for sponsoring this month's Design and Business webinar series. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Jen Mallett, CEO and founder of Level Up Automation. Jen, please take it away.
Welcome to Introduction to Integrated Lighting Design, a course provided by CEDIA Professional Development. My name is Jen Mallett. I am the founder of Level Up Automation. We are an integration company that operates in 9 US markets. I've been in the integration industry for a little over 20 years, and we teach courses to the NKBA and other design professionals to help get them up to speed on what's happening in the technology space. Integrated lighting design is booming. There's 20% compound annual growth rate over the next 5 years predicted. So you're in a great course today because this category is growing quite quickly. In terms of my company, we offer lighting, entertainment, shading controls, any type of technology piece that is represented in the residential area. And how we and other integrators support designers is really through bringing all these functions and systems within the residential space and bringing them into a place where they can control them very seamlessly, which is not always easy to do. So we work with design professionals like a lot of integration companies to help create that end user experience that helps people really maximize the enjoyment of their home. So as we proceed here, I want to talk a little bit about CEDIA, who has created this professional development course. CEDIA stands for the Custom Electronics Design and Installation Association, and we are a nonprofit organization with about 3,700 members globally. And we are really all about designing, installing, and servicing technology and working with design build professionals to make sure that that experience is well thought out and that the end result is as envisioned. This course was brought to you through a partnership with the IDCEC, which is the International Design Continuing Education Council. So all of you who are attending today's presentation will earn your CEU credits. And this is one of really a catalog of courses that are available in partnership with the CEDIA organization and the IDCEC. This CEU, as I mentioned, is registered with the International Design Continuing Education Council. And we're proud to provide this as well as a few other courses that are hot topics that help you really understand where technology is going. Our learning objectives today, they are fourfold. One, we want to find out really why early planning is critical. Secondly, how to partner with a lighting professional or an integration professional that specializes in lighting to make sure that the objectives of the project are clearly defined and that the end result is as envisioned, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to teach you really what are the keywords to listen and look out for, as well as how to prompt the question as part of the design process with your clients. A lot of what we'll talk about in here is that people just don't know what they don't know, and part of lighting controls and designing lighting and designing how you control that lighting and that experience really is lined up with helping people understand what's possible. So we'll talk about how you ask the question within that design process that you have. Why is good lighting important? And I love this visual here because this is a very inviting space. And that isn't an accident. Good lighting and great lighting doesn't happen by accident. It truly is an integrated part of the design process. Within this visual that you see multiple forms of lighting. We'll talk a little bit about layering lighting and the different techniques that you can employ as part of the design process. Within this photo, you see that there is lighting within cabinetry, there is up lighting, there's some down lighting, there's linear lighting, multiple different approaches as part of this. And also, what you'll see here is really color temperature, and we're going to talk about lighting quality and the differences in lighting quality, as well as lighting temperature and how that affects the experience that the individual has within the space. This area, when you look at it, is someplace that's very inviting, someplace you want to go in and sit, maybe have a conversation with some friends or family, and that truly is by design. So I'm excited to talk to you about how you can employ this as part of your design process as well. Let's take a look at what typical lighting is. This is typical lighting. And typical lighting is essentially, usually within the design build process, what people might typically do around downlighting and other aspects of the space. We're going to look at another example in a few slides around what really designed lighting looks like and the difference between typical lighting and that. Typical lighting here, you can see there are some recessed downlights in the ceiling, a few over by the kitchen, some by a seating area. You see some lighting here through a fan fixture. You also see a dining area off in the distance. Within typical lighting, what you'll see here is there isn't a lot of layering techniques that's happening. There's different modes, there's down lighting and there's a lamp, but there isn't a lot of utilization around linear lighting in different places than underneath cabinets or other areas. And you'll also notice that the temperature of this lighting, while consistent across the space, is very monochromatic. So it doesn't have a lot of life to it. So as we look at good lighting and what that looks like, good lighting really happens through planning within each of the spaces, taking a look at how people want to live and experience in that space. For this particular kitchen we have here, we have a different approach. There's a few things that are in play here. One, you'll see that there are not several cans or recessed downlights in the ceiling. And a reason why that is not like this is because having lots of downlights or cans in the ceiling creates glare. And glare is what you want to avoid in good lighting. So within this particular shot, there's one small recessed downlight that is there. You can see that it's not a 6-inch or an 8-inch wide can. It's a very small aperture type of recessed downlight. So that is one element here. We also have some other fixtures which are different in terms of the space where the dinette is. There's a fixture that is there that is providing some light to the people sitting in the space so that they can enjoy whatever they're eating or drinking in that space, but they're not receiving any glare as part of downlights coming down. We also have natural light in this space, and really good lighting takes into account our most powerful light in the world, which is the sun. And the sun is a very big part of lighting design because you can control the light within a space with automated shades, and you also can coordinate it with the lighting that is inside as well. So this is a great example of lighting that is really a step up from this view, which has really some cans in the ceiling, a couple fixtures, but it isn't as inviting a space. And that truly is by design and by planning. Let's talk about layering in lighting design. Within layering and lighting design, really what that means is it means that you're taking a look at a space and you're looking at how people are going to, again, like live in that space, and how do you create a lighting experience that is aligned with the people living in the space. So a great example of that is within the context of the couches that are sitting here. You'll see that there is a little bit of track lighting there, but again, there's not a lot of recessed down lights or cans in the ceiling pumping light down from above. You'll also see that different layers of light here with lamps and linear lighting that is carrying your eye across to this beautiful cityscape that is outside. So within the context of this view, layering is not only looking at top down ceiling all the way to the floor how the lighting is designed, but you're also looking at the depth of the space. So we talked a little bit about the linear lighting that's happening outside that's helping draw attention to the beautiful view, but also towards the back of this same room on the other side, you can see that there's a wall sconce lamp that is providing a nice glow area that is very inviting for that portion of this space. So layering is probably one of the first things you're going to want to think about when you're looking at a space, trying to understand what are those different nooks within that space that you want to light. How do people use that space? Are they reading there? Are they entertaining there? Are they doing other things there? What are they doing there? And then how do we match that light to that space? In addition to the layering in terms of what fixture you're utilizing, you also want to think about really how is that light going to be controlled? We could have, in this case, all the lights on in this particular room. Maybe that's the experience that's right for this particular part of day. But we as humans have different needs for different parts of the day. So if you're looking at layering light, you're also thinking about what do you want to control? So a great example of that here is within that same lamp that is towards the back of this photo, you can see that it might be that person sits down on that couch, it's later in the evening, and you know what? They don't want the overhead lights on, and they might not want the other set of lamps on. Maybe they want to feel like they're in their own world by the side of the couch there. So being able to control those layers is just as important as designing the layers. So within that, if you can envision a person maybe pushing a button that cues off a scene that turns off those alternate lights, or maybe the person actually speaks out to their house and those lighting loads that the person doesn't want on automatically go off or dim off at a certain rate so the person can enjoy and relax within their space. So layering is really important. We'll talk more about that throughout this presentation. It is layering the actual fixtures and the lighting, but you're also thinking about how is this layering being controlled within the experience for the person living in it. Let's talk more about downlighting. Downlighting is probably the most popular form of lighting in new construction and remodel. And as we talked about earlier, there's a typical way to employ downlights, which tends to be a lot of cans in the ceiling. Your choices are much broader than what is typical. So downlighting can not only be 6 inches like what you typically see, but they can also be very, very small. So within this picture, for example, you see that the recessed downlights are very, very small. They can be as small as 1 inch in diameter, which really, when you're looking at a ceiling, we have a phrase we utilize with people who have more of a minimalist approach to design within their homes. And we talk about having a quiet ceiling. Having a quiet ceiling means you don't have a lot of large downlights. You still may have downlights and utilize recessed downlights as part of your design, but they may be smaller and they most definitely will be intentionally placed. So you can see here, this is not just lines of cans that are lined up in the ceiling. They are really over specific spots where extra downlight is needed for task activities typically. So that might be within, for example, this bar area, there's some downlighting here. It might be that somebody's making cocktails or chopping hors d'oeuvres on that space, and you need that downlight to be able to do that task work safely. But it doesn't need to be everywhere. Downlighting also can be reflected in fixtures like chandeliers. You can see here, there's some beautiful lighting fixtures that are part of this design. And what they do is they help offset the recessed downlighting that would be in typical lighting. And that does a couple things. One, it beautifies the space and adds to the design. But secondarily, it takes the load off of what would be a lot of recessed downlights and allows us to be able to keep that quieter ceiling in place. I'll also mention, as we look at different lighting fixtures, we're going to talk a bit about the quality of light and the difference between a recessed downlight or a fixture that may be $30 versus $200 or $300 per fixture. There are absolutely differences in the quality of light that is provided by those fixtures, the controllability of that light, whether or not it can be controlled in different zones, and in the layering example we provided earlier. It also is in the performance of the light, whether it be a chandelier or a recessed downlight fixture. And what you'll see with some of the less expensive fixtures is you'll start to see when you start to dim those fixtures, you'll start to see flickering or other things that are not atypical. So when you're looking at recessed downlights and other fixtures, we're going to talk today a little bit about how you can identify fixtures that are going to provide the right light quality, and also are fixtures that you can be confident that are going to perform well and not flicker when being dimmed, which is a very common problem when it's not planned out well. So that is downlighting. So we no longer need a lot of cans in the ceiling. We really can employ a lot of different types of downlights, whether they be round, there are square downlights, there are trimless downlights, and there are a lot of different chandelier fixtures that are out there in the marketplace so that we can provide great experiences. Let's talk about uplighting. Uplighting is, I think, one of the most beautiful ways you can accent a space, and particularly design features that you are putting in your projects. And within this picture, I love this wall that is very textured behind this booth. The linear light that has been designed as part of this space is uplighting and highlighting that investment that this restaurant made. And without that light, it would look completely different. It might fall flat. So really being able to utilize uplighting to highlight architectural items, like maybe it's beams, or maybe it is a beautiful fireplace center feature that is part of a great room. You can certainly downlight those items, but uplighting them provides a different look and feel to them. That is very, very powerful. It is also very easy, typically, if they're planned really well, to be able to put this lighting in place where it really looks hidden. And that happens through very close coordination with design professionals, as well as, in some cases, we'll talk about cabinet makers or other people that are working with wood to make sure that we are making sure that these linear lights and uplighting, in this case, are really integrated into the experience without looking like somebody was running wires there. On the other side of this picture, you can see that there's some really great shells and other items that are part of this space. You could also envision this might be pottery or artwork, really a number of different things. And the linear lighting, which is providing uplighting in this space, towards the back of the shelves that are here, there's a few things that happen to help accomplish that. One is that as part of the construction, the low voltage wiring is in each of those spaces. So as part of that conversation and as part of that preparation work, we need to ensure that that light infrastructure and the wiring is there ahead of the shelves, ahead of the millwork that is here on the wall, so that we can ensure that we can actually accomplish the uplight that we want to provide. The other aspect of this that is really important as you look at uplighting really is, again, how are you going to want to control this space? How are you going to want to control this uplighting? Do you want this beautiful linear wall wash that is happening with a textured wall on at the same time as the shelf lighting? Maybe, maybe not. So that's kind of part of what you're really looking to understand as well, which is when we're layering light and looking at different lighting techniques, what zones do we want to control when? It might be completely acceptable for these to be turned on together and dimmed on and off as well together. Or it might be that they really are separate spaces. So those are design questions that you have with a client to really understand what sort of effect do you want to have within this space. Let's talk about cove lighting, which is a very popular lighting fixture that is used oftentimes in bedrooms, great rooms. In this case, we also have it in a gym. Cove lighting is a great way to provide ambient light in a space, an additional layer to your design. And it also allows you not to put so many recessed down lights in a space because it carries a lot of that load in terms of being able to provide ambient lighting in the space without having direct glare, as we talked about earlier. Cove lighting is often put out there through linear lighting, also called track lighting. In some cases, it's called ribbon lighting. We often reference it as linear lighting. And within the linear lighting space, it can be white, it can be color, it can be tunable white. We'll talk a little bit about the different approaches you can take with lighting, temperature, and color a little bit later. But cove lighting really requires within the construction phase and the design phase, as you're looking at your lighting plan and looking at the space, it requires us to plan to make sure that the right wiring is located at the right place within the cove. In many cases, linear lighting requires drivers, which are located in different parts of the house, whether it be a closet or somewhere else. So it requires some coordination in terms of where we're going to hide those things. But when executed, it's really beautiful. And it allows us to really keep that quiet ceiling that we talked about earlier and prevent really what could be in this space, some of these spaces, 6 or 8 recessed downlights that are providing glare. Talk a little bit more about track and linear lighting. Track lighting is not the traditional track lighting that you've seen for many, many years. There are many fixture options that are available, many color temperatures, and many types of colors that we can provide. Linear lighting, as you can see over here on the gym picture, can not only be in coves, as we've looked at earlier, and other areas where it provides uplighting, it can be a design feature, a really exciting design feature as part of a space. So in this case, there's linear line tracks that are provided in the ceiling for this particular gym. While it's not showing color, my guess is that it also can provide some different fun colors as needed for the person that is living there. And it really is art in a way on your ceiling. So the linear light that you have available now is much different than it was a decade ago. Same thing with track lighting. There are a lot of different options to really provide a great design aesthetic to the space. Let's talk about lamps. So it was one of our last layers that we have is our lamps. And lamps are a fantastic way to add really warmth to a space, personalization to a space. And it's also a great way to be able to not only bring your and your client's design aesthetic to a space because there are so many options, but it's a great way to make sure that we're not having a lot of glare in a space. Lamps are incredibly powerful in terms of being able to provide a real great ambiance to a room without having glare that you traditionally get in a ceiling. So lamps as part of your layering strategy, probably one of the most powerful parts of your layering strategy. as you think about controlling those lamps, there have been great advancements in the last 5 years around those outlets that the lamps are connected to are controllable and can be part of scenes and other lighting control systems. There are also smart bulbs that can be part of the lamp fixture that provide different temperatures of light based on the time of day. So lamps are fantastic and a great part of your integrated lighting design. Let's talk about lighting for cabinets, built-in, and closets. In this particular picture, what you can see is a lot of linear light, down lighting in this case. This also could have been designed with up lighting for linear lighting. In this case, down lighting within this cabinet looks beautiful. And it really happened through intentional design because there's a lot of coordination between trades that need to happen in order to accomplish this look. So part of that really is in understanding what is going to be the right lighting fixture within the space. In this case, they chose linear lighting. You can see that some of the linear lighting that is here, you don't see things like diodes, you don't see dots, which you oftentimes see with linear lighting. And that is by design. So there are parts of linear lighting that have different types of filters that can be applied so that you have a very even dispersion of light and you don't see the LED light diodes across the actual linear light. So those are two examples that they utilize as part of this design. Also, within the cabinetry here, this lighting fixture is flush and seamless with the actual cabinet. And that is through coordination with the lighting designer, the integrator, the interior designer, the interior designers there, as well as the cabinet maker to make sure that as part of that lighting fixture installation, there is a very specific track that has been created within this beautiful cabinetry so that the fixture can just lay seamless right into the cabinet. In addition to making sure that the fixture is seamless and laying flat and also has the right filter and shield on it to disperse the light very well, the other part really is around how do you wire for this? And you wire through this through that design process and making sure if this is one lighting zone all in this space, that essentially we are designing the infrastructure behind that to make sure that the wiring is all there so that the lighting fixtures actually can be lit up. And within this space, I envision it's probably one zone. But as we talked about earlier, you can create multiple zones within this space. So it might be, for example, if you're sitting on this couch and it's the evening and you're watching something on television, you might not want to have the additional lighting that is next to the screen. So you might want to turn that zone down or off while keeping some of the other linear lighting on the side of the room on for ambient light. So in addition to fixture selection and layering and understanding what you're going to employ, always thinking about the control and how you want to control that space is really important upfront in the design process because the wiring that supports these lights really depend on understanding how the zones should be controlled and whether or not it's one zone or multiple zones. Color changing within the lighting space is very exciting because it can create art within a residential space, whether that be inside the home or outside the home. And in this case, we see both. So within color changing, there are a few different ways that we look at color changing when we're specifying lights. One is white, a traditional white that you might dim with a certain color temperature. You can also have RGB, red, green, blue, which is the color aspect of the lighting. And you can also have RGBW, which means that you might have a different color temperature for the white as well as the traditional red, blue color, red, blue, green color spectrum And lastly, on the upper end of capability for lighting, whether it be linear lights or bulbs or other fixtures, is RGBTW, and that stands for the red, green, blue. And then we've got tunable white. And we'll talk a little bit about circadian rhythm and things like that a little later in the course. And we'll talk about tunable white and what that means and why that is really the highest performing way to control and reflect within a space. Whites is tunable white. Lastly here, daylight and shading in terms of a technique. We need to look at the sun. We need to look at the light coming in the space in order to really have an integrated lighting design. And within today's world, we have not only traditional shades that can be pulled down, but also automated shades. So if you could envision coming into a space during a particular part of day, the shades within this space can move up and down based on where the sun is. So I'll give you an example in my kitchen. When the sun rises every day, my shades go up automatically. I don't need to press anything. I don't need to say anything. It just knows what time of year it is because they're internet connected, and they rise so that I can enjoy my coffee and be able to see. And then at night, my shades go down because it knows when sunset is. And when I want to cook and be able to have some privacy in the house, the shades go down. So automated shades, in addition to lighting controls, they really work together because being able to control daylight, which really is the sun is our most powerful light source that we have here, not considering that as part of the design is a big miss because it really is a very powerful way to have a holistic view of how you're going to control the light in a space. So automated shades are fantastic and have really come a long way in the last couple of years. So those are the different ways that you can essentially design what the fixtures are. We talked a little bit about downlighting, uplighting, layering, track lighting, lamps, how to employ them as part of cabinets and things like that. Now we're really going to talk about light quality. And this is really important because the industry within smart lighting has been exploding over the last number of years, and it'll continue to grow at a 20% compound annual growth rate over the next 5 years. We are really just getting started. And there's a lot of different products out in the marketplace, and there are a lot of different messages, marketing messages that are being delivered. So I'm here to help you make sure that you understand what light quality is, you understand the differences between the fixtures that are out there, so that you can also educate your clients to make sure that they understand why a $30 downlight from a big box store versus the $200 or $300 downlight that you're specifying, why they're different and what's happening as part of that. So as we look at light quality, we look at something called CRI, which is color rendering index. And CRI, essentially when you're looking at the light quality, you really want to be looking at least a 90% CRI for a quality light. And the reason why there are apples and fruits on this particular slide is that based on the CRI that that particular light fixture has, this fruit will look different. So with a CRI that might be, let's say, 60, these apples would look dull. With a CRI, color rendering index, of over 90, you're going to get what an actual apple is intended to look like in natural daylight. So CRI is a really important item to look at when you're looking at lighting fixtures to ensure that the quality of the light is what it should be. After CRI, we look at lumens, which is the measure of brightness that is being provided by that lighting fixture. So oftentimes when you're looking at lighting fixtures, it's one of the key specs that you'll see. And so when you're looking at lumens, you want to make sure that depending upon what the function is of that light in the space, that it's going to be able to produce enough lumens to adequately meet the need of that space. So a great example of this is if you are designing a kitchen space, and oftentimes there is task lighting over an island. A lot of people do their cutting there, they do all the task work that's happening. And you need to have brightness in order to be able to essentially do that function safely. So when you're looking at the lumens within the space, you're going to want to make sure that the actual fixture produces the right amount of lumens. Cheaper fixtures tend to not have the ability to provide as much output as a higher quality fixture. CCT is really the third element when we look at lighting quality, and this is the correlated color temperature. And this graphic shows that, every number from 1,000 all the way to 10,000, and it's measuring something called kelvins, which you may be familiar with. And this is really how we look at the temperature of light. And just like temperatures outside, if we're measuring Fahrenheit for heat and things like that, Kelvin really represents the temperature of light itself. And so as we look at residential lighting fixtures and their capabilities, we're really looking at this scale around 2,700 to 4,000 is typical range for a residential lighting fixture. So you can see it's really in that and that beginning of that kind of like warmer zone to the mid portion of this chart. And that is the space that people like to be in when they're in their homes. On the other side of that, when you look at commercial spaces, so if you could think of surgery rooms or doctor's offices or spaces where you really are doing a lot of work or the ability to be able to see things, warm light isn't as important. And so really when you're looking at the commercial side of it, you'll see fixtures that are between 3,500 all the way up to 6,000 Kelvin. And that is by design. So within that space and what we've talked about with integrated lighting design controls, as well as the actual spaces that you have, what you want to look at is what is the color temperature range you're going to want for that particular space. And different fixtures have different ranges and capabilities. If you were to go to a big box store and pick up a smart downlight, it might have 3 options for you to have a certain Kelvin temperature. And maybe there's typically a switch on the downlight that you click and say, okay, this is going to be 3,000 kelvins, this light, and then it just stays 3,000 Kelvin the entire time. So as we looked at typical lighting earlier in the presentation today, that is typical lighting. You have one static Kelvin that is available. Really within the context of how we design now is that we're able to change the Kelvin based on integrated lighting controls. We're able to tie it in with the time of day, and we're able to accomplish within the space a much healthier light for the individual that is living within that space. So CCT, kelvins, as you're looking at different lighting fixtures and the temperature of light, this is a big key component in addition to the CRI and lumens that we talked about earlier. Those are 3 things that you're going to want to look at. Related to kelvins and color temperature, we're going to talk a little bit about circadian lighting. And circadian lighting really is human-centric lighting. And it's really the thought that there is a lot of science around human evolution and the type of light that we are used to seeing. For many, many thousands of years, humans lived close to outside. And so really our primary light source before electricity was the sun. And a lot of our body is really regulated by the light. And there's a lot of wellness that you can incorporate as part of your design and your lighting techniques when you look at circadian lighting. Certain lighting fixtures and lighting control systems have the ability to do things that are really magical, in my opinion. And one of them is that lighting controls can now, in addition to the actual fixture, be able to look at the sunrise and the sunset and be able to match the lighting temperature outside with what's happening inside. So, for example, if it's essentially noon here on this slide, which is a very kind of cool temperature, it's really in that cooler side of the Kelvin scale that we looked at a slide before. You can see that that's by intent. As humans, we are supposed to be alert. Midday, we might be doing tasks, and it's supposed to be that cooler color. We're supposed to be up. In the morning, as we wake up, there's sunrise, and you'll notice the sunrise is not a bright white. It is actually this softer, sort of orange color. And then slowly, as you start to wake up and you kind of move towards midday, it gets cooler and cooler. It moves up that temperature scale closer to that 10,000 number. So as you look at that and you go to the other side of it, which is really winding down into the evening, sunset is typically that warmer temperature. So within that, that's really important because at night, we're supposed to, as humans, traditionally wind down. And what your eyes see and what your body essentially is taking in is really important. A really good example on the evening side of it is we have all been taught that blue screens are not great at night. And that is an excellent example of why circadian lighting is so important. Our smartphones now have the ability to not have as much blue light at night. We have glasses that we're able to put on that helps us from really receiving a blue light or a cool light that you might see at noon at 6 o'clock at night. And the reason is that there are a number of different studies that say that really will impact your ability for your body to wind down and get ready for evening and get ready for bed. So integrated lighting control systems and integrated lighting design now can essentially work with how the world and how all light really works. It is able to match what you're supposed to experience if you were outside like we were thousands of years ago. And with the right fixture selection, with the right lighting control selection as part of that design process, this is accomplishable now, which is pretty magical. We talked a little bit about CRI and color rendering index earlier and how important it is. And this is just a good chart that shows essentially, you've got everything between what's included in CRI and what's not included in CRI. Not all light is equal. And when you look at different fixtures, there is a quality even to that CRI piece. So as you look at where items are manufactured, how they're manufactured, if you look at, for example, grades of beef is a good example. You might have prime all the way to something that's more a value cut of beef. Lighting fixtures are very similar in that respect, in that you're going to get a great quality of light when you have that prime lighting fixture versus a more budget line lighting fixture. And that will be represented in how well the color of those apples, as we talked about earlier, is reflected. So planning for lighting design and controls and everything we talked about early really starts early in the process. Right when the architectural plans have started to come together, right when you're talking about spaces and working with a client and understanding how they want to live in their house, that is the right time to start thinking about and planning and working with trade professionals on what is going to be the lighting experience within the residential space. And as we talked about earlier, we're really looking at saying, okay, we're selecting fixtures. I'd say that's probably the last part of the process. As you start it, it really is about how do you want to live in this space? What is the purpose of this room? Is the room multi-purpose? And then as you look at it from there, you're figuring out what are the layers of light that you're going to reflect in that space? What type of fixtures then are within that space? And at the same time, you're thinking about the control of that space and what are the different lighting zones that you want to make sure that there are controls for. Because as part of this, the earlier we are in the process in terms of making sure that the wiring is where it needs to be, if there are drivers for the lighting fixtures, that they are sourced and we have a space for them that is appropriate for the house. We also are looking at lighting controls, understanding, are these lighting fixtures going to be on dimmers? Are they going to be on switches? Are there going to be keypads? Which essentially, if you look at integrated lighting design and control, keypads are an ability for us to take multiple experiences, and instead of having a bank of switches, which within our industry we call wall acme, when you have 5 or 6 switches that are on a wall in a kitchen, very, very common, that are controlling different loads. What we can now do, if we start the learning process earlier, is slim that down and have maybe a keypad instead of 5 switches or dimmers, one that controls the overhead light, one that controls ambient lighting, and maybe one that's all off or all on. And so it's a great way to be able to keep your wall space, make things very easy to control. If you have a large bank of switches, it's likely if somebody were to walk in your house, they'd need to turn them all on in order to understand how to turn on what they want to turn on. If you plan early, we're now able to actually just create experiences in one simple keypad that might say relax, entertain, or control certain loads. But that part really has to start early within that architectural plan process where we can help understand what is going to be there for wall controls, what they're going to control, and then what the infrastructure wiring is part of that process. So really, you cannot start early enough with designing great lighting. And I'd encourage everybody to start the conversation early and really think about it in ways beyond just the fixtures, but thinking about the controls and the layering and the quality of the light that is going to be provided to your client. Because as I mentioned earlier, not all lighting fixtures are the same that are available. So start early and you'll be as successful as you can be. It's very hard to retrofit great lighting after construction. As we look at design documentation, this is a great example of sitting down with a client, understanding we've got an electrical plan here, we've got zones lined up, and in some cases we have essentially fans and other fixtures that have been identified. This is at the point where what you want to do is really start to understand, as I mentioned earlier, how are all these lighting loads going to be controlled? And they're going to be controlled through really great planning, ideally being able to miss all those switches, condense lighting controls, and help them work for the client the best they can through design. So if I were to, for example, be sitting with a client and a designer, and we were looking at this room here at the top that has the fans in it, and then looks like there are 6 recessed downlights in this space, the conversation would be essentially, how are people yet leveraging the space? How do they envision using it? Is it multi-purpose? Is it singular purpose? And where should the lighting controls be? On what wall? What makes sense? When somebody walks into a room, does it make sense to have the lighting control on the opposite wall? Does it make sense for it to be on the wall and the entry places? Probably. It might make also another sense as we look at that space, maybe at night when somebody walks into this room, they want the lights to be able to turn on automatically without having to fumble through a switch. And as we look at design documentation, we can put things like wireless sensors in place to ensure that we can program during a certain time of day. Let's say it's nighttime, and we want to be able to have somebody be able to walk into the room after 10 o'clock at night. They're going to go get a glass of water, and those lights come on, not at a bright level. Maybe they come on at 50%. Maybe it's toe kick lights and not the overhead lights. All of that happens through design. So we find that one of the most powerful things when you get to this place where you have these architectural plans and there's an idea of what the electrical diagram is going to look like, what the fixtures are going to look like, really sitting down and understanding how do we want to control this space with great lighting controls that help people enjoy it the most. So design documentation is really a great place to be able to start when you get it. So we're going to recap real quickly. Early planning is really critical. As I said earlier, I really believe can't start early enough. Even before architectural plans, it's helpful to be able to expose clients to the different types of lighting, the different types of quality of lighting, being able to show trimless options, which are very popular right now, round options or square options. Square is becoming very popular right now. So being able to have those conversations to understand, just like other elements of the space that you're designing, what their design choices are, because 9 times out of 10, they probably will not know what's possible. And you're in a unique position where you can make sure that they have exposure to what's possible out there and be able to help them understand the differences between the different types of fixtures that are there. So early planning is important. Partnering with a lighting professional, whether or not you have a lighting designer on the project or not. There are many different ways to be able to leverage, whether it be an integration company like ours, or a CEDIA professional, or a lighting designer that is specifically does lighting design. There's many different resources that you have to be able to lean on to really understand and prioritize different parts of the lighting experience within the house. So definitely, if you're newer to this, there's a lot of great professionals that are out here to help you navigate your first few projects. Keywords to listen and look out for, certainly understanding how people are living in that particular space and being able to understand the look and feel they want to accomplish in that space, whether or not they're more of a minimalist type of client, or whether or not they have more of a traditional style to them, will really help you understand how you're going to design around lighting, what features you're going to employ in terms of layering and things like that. So think about how you want to help your client accomplish that, and really listen to the typical things you listen to around what's their style and what are they like? How are they going to live in that space? And that will really help you understand what the right lighting choices are going to be with them. And this last one's really important, which is to ask the question. And what this means is, if the planning is not starting early because no one has brought to the table, what is the lighting going to look like in this home? Or what do you envision feeling when you're in this home at night? And what does that look like to you, right? If that question is not asked in time, what happens is you end up with typical lighting. You end up with what we call four cans and a fan, which is a very traditional production builder technique in which you have a ceiling and you've got four cans in the ceiling around it, and that is the lighting design. So you end up with that if we don't ask the question earlier, be able to get that infrastructure in terms of wiring, understanding where there's drivers, understanding whether there's up lighting, down lighting, how is that controlled, what do the walls controls look like. So if you ask the question, you'll be able to get ahead of that and make sure that you don't have typical lighting, which we all hope to avoid, because lighting is so important. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope that this was enlightening in terms of helping you understand what the different capabilities are out there for lighting, why not all lighting is the same, and how you start to accomplish and integrate lighting design, great lighting design, not typical lighting design in your business. So we will pause here and ask questions, have the ability to ask questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Hello, everyone. Jen, thank you so much for joining today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has as well. We do have a few questions from the audience, so let's dive right in. Jen, our
Great.
first question is from Alina. Alina asks, I'm working on a lower end house flip and would like to add some lighting details to make it stand out. Do you have any suggestions based on what you mentioned?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that when you look at the principles of what we covered, thinking about getting in early on the design process, making sure that low voltage wiring is where it needs to be if you're utilizing cove lighting or any other type of accent lighting. Lamps always can be added later, right? But when you're looking at design in terms of your ceiling or ambient lighting, you want to start there. Make sure that you're working with the trade professional, usually an integrator or an electrician, to make sure that that wire is there before the insulation and drywall goes up, because once that's done, it's done. And then I think I'd really just think about how your clients are going to use the space. What are those nooks that they're going to want to read in or entertain in, or maybe it's an entertainment space where there's a television. So think about what you'd like to sit in during multiple times of day, and then design your light around that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kayla asks, what happens when the lights burn out? How easy is it to fix/repair when they are hidden, like in the shelf lights that you mentioned, or in your uplighting example, or fibers for cove lighting?
Fantastic question. And so I'll share that LEDs bring a lot of benefits. They bring color, controlling, all sorts of things. But when you're working them into really specific areas in construction, you're wondering, well, how can I replace these, right? If they're so hard to put in. Fortunately, LED lights have a lifespan of between 25,000 to 100,000 hours. So what that translates to is if you leave the light on for 8 hours a day, on the lower end, you're going to get 17 years out of that fixture. On the higher end, you're going to get 34 years. So chances are, if you have a high quality LED light, it'll last at least 20 years, probably more than that. And by then, they'll probably be ready to remodel.
Great, thank you. Dana asks, for cove lighting, are you seeing use of a type of linear fixture so the light flows outward more than just straight up? And how do you handle rounded corners and coves?
Another great question. So with linear lighting, what you want to avoid is this kind of look of diodes. And there are things that are called diffusers. So I have one right here, which is a diffuser piece. Multiple different types of diffusers that are meant to do different things. So some diffusers are meant to spread that linear light. Others are meant to direct that linear light. So through choosing the right diffuser product that goes along with the linear light, you'll be able to accomplish what you're looking to do. And then in terms of the bendability of the product, it really depends on the quality of the product. So higher level LED products are meant to be curved and be able to go in multiple different places. So make sure that you're sourcing a really quality linear light.
Thank you for showing that example. I'm sure that's helpful.
Sure.
Patricia asks, I'm working on a new construction project and we are in the wiring phase now. There's a high open ceiling with lots of angles, and the client would like there to be a ceiling fan. How can I add ceiling lighting that won't cause a strobe effect?
A strobe effect. So for those of you who don't know, strobe effect is that kind of like if you're in a dance club type of look where things are flickering, but not in a good way, not by intention. There's really a few things that you're going to want to look at to avoid strobing in that situation. So the fan light, that is certainly a very popular thing. Make sure that that lighting fixture in that light has a good LED bulb or maybe a minimal LED bulb, so it's more of an accent piece to the rest of the lighting you're designing around. And then in terms of avoiding strobing, you're going to want a high quality CRI product. Really, it shouldn't be something that's kind of just off the shelf, probably. If you're really concerned about strobing, you do have to be careful about the type of fixture you pick. And then you need to think about the wiring that's in place, the quality of the wiring, make sure the connections are solid. So working with your low voltage or your electrician to make sure that is important. And then in addition to that, you're going to want to look at the lighting controls. So the fixture is one element, and then the actual lighting controls. So maybe it's like a touch keypad, for example, that has different scenes on it. Not all of the wall controls are the same either. So when you look at the quality of your lighting fixture, you also need to look at the quality of your lighting controls on the wall. Strobing typically happens from a poor quality LED light, a lighting control on the wall that is not compatible with that LED light. So those are the things you're going to want to look at: the wiring, the quality of the light, and making sure that that particular light is compatible with your wall control or whatever is controlling the dimming through that light on the wall or through your phone or voice, whatever the client prefers.
Thank you. Karen asks,
Yeah.
is it at all feasible to do integrated lighting design in a residential remodel? And what are the challenges in doing so?
That is another great question. We've got really great questions from this group. So yes, it is possible. It is more challenging. 70% of our business is new build, 30% of it is retrofit. So we feel you on the retrofit part. When you're working in a retrofit, some of the challenges are, if the wiring was already done, like let's say it was done 30 years ago, right? There's a high likelihood that there are 2 ways, 3 ways, 4 ways in multiple rooms, which basically means there's multiple switches that are driving the loads, right? So people can walk in from any room. Modern lighting design control doesn't have all the 2 ways and 3 ways and 4 ways. That really is now all centralized to a few switches that do multiple things. So I would say that that's a big one, is that you're just going to need to be extra careful as you're assessing the existing switches and existing wiring, the older wiring that's there, understanding, okay, how much of that is moving forward. Now, let's say you're working on a remodel of like let's say it's an extra room, a bonus room, right? Where the electrician is starting all of the line voltage lighting from scratch, then that's a lot easier for you, because if you have the walls down, right, and they're putting the controls on the walls, then you have the opportunity to influence that design and make sure that there aren't a bunch of 2 ways, 3 ways, 4 ways on there. So it can be done. There's certainly a lot more houses that exist than ones that are being built. So it's something that we come across quite a bit. And you're just going to want to make sure as that project rolls on that you're identifying which loads are staying on the wall and which ones aren't, and then making sure that you're matching the right compatible switch if there's 3 ways and 4 ways and things like that, which basically means you've got a primary switch and then you have companion switches that also need to work within the same lighting system.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All are great variables to consider. You briefly spoke on the lighting differences that affect our circadian rhythm. What kind of
Mhm.
lighting do you recommend in the area that people watch TV on a typical day?
Mhm. That's a great question. I would say it depends on what time of day it is. So if it's high noon and somebody's watching television, they're probably, if there's light in the room coming in through windows, right? Probably not a lot of need for overhead light or light in the room. If it's a darker room, it's the middle of the day, I would probably still have it a little bit cooler because it's not nighttime. If it's going into the evening, everybody gets home from work, they're around the television, you're going to want to look at fixtures that have warm to dim type of capability, which means they can have that cooler Kelvin temperature at noon, but also can ramp to a warmer temperature at night, which is, if you think of like the older bulbs that had a little bit of a yellow type of feel to them, it kind of gives the ability in a modern way to get to that warmer light, which is just so much better for television viewing and also your health.
Awesome. Moving on to our last question. What do
All
you
right.
think of using wafer lighting in the ceiling instead of recessed down lighting?
So I think that it depends on the client and it depends on the application of it. I think it's a good budgetary source. So if somebody has a room where, let's say, they're not going to use it that much, or it's a kid's playroom and they don't want to go, they don't have a budget where it's $100, $150 a downlight and you want to use wafer lights, I would get a high quality wafer light from a brand name, which also can be through like a big box store. They sell those. So that's a good application of that. If you're going to want to convert that space in a number of years to a dedicated home theater, you might want to invest a little bit more. But there are big differences in the wafer lights versus the drivable fixture lights that people use in the spaces where you want the highest quality of light. And they're typically not all in one fixture. They actually will have sometimes a driver, the actual aperture of the light, and then maybe a trim. So on the higher end projects, you're really kind of almost building those fixtures because they're custom. They might be trimless, they might have a trim, they might be square, they might be round. So wafer lights are great for a budgetary choice and just utilize a brand name that's well known.
All right, awesome. Jen, this has been great. Thank you again for
Thank
joining and
you.
sharing your expertise with us all. Before we close out today's webinar, do you have any last remarks for our audience?
No, I really enjoyed this. They're great questions. I would say feel free to reach out if we can be of any support to you. Happy to do so. And we look forward to continuing this partnership with the NKBA. Thank you for having us. This was great.
Thank you again. I'd also like to thank Hardware Resources for generously sponsoring this month's design business webinars. For those who would still like to ask Jen a question but haven't yet, I will hold the hold screen up for a minute or two. So feel free to type in any questions and we'll directly answer you via email. Until next time, I hope everyone enjoys their Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.